Hello everybody and welcome to the Alien vs Predator Galaxy podcast. This is regular host Aaron Percival, and joining me is my usual partner in crime, Eric Adams.
That's me. I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for this particular episode.
Because it's Alien Day, so that means we wanted to give you something a little bit different than just a couple of, I was going to say nerds then, but we settled on enthusiasts, haven't we, Eric?
We did, yes.
So something a little bit more different than the usual enthusiasts chatting Alien and Predator in your ears. We've trapped somebody who worked on these films to come and actually chat to us about a time working on one of the films that we're normally nerding out about. So I'd just like to welcome Carrie Henn to the podcast. Welcome, Carrie.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. And you know what, I must be so honest, I was so surprised at how quick this all came together. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, no problem. It worked out well because when you asked me, I had half term. So
yeah, I was going to ask because I didn't know. Didn't know if they were sort of the same in the States. Because over here, I think it's about half term now as well.
I know my cousin's children are on half term right now, so we don't actually call it that. For us, for my school district, because we have President's Day.
Right.
And they actually give us a whole week off. So we're very fortunate this year to have a week off at this time. So
that's worked out quite nicely then.
Yeah.
So, again, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and chat to us. But before we do start being enthusiasts about aliens, for our listeners who might not be aware, could you just tell us a little bit about where life took you after Aliens?
Well, shortly after Aliens finished filming, my dad, who was in the Air Force at the time, he was stationed at RAF Lakenheath, was actually moved back to, stationed back in America. So we came back to America, and I contemplated going back into doing something with acting because I live in California now. But I chose I wanted to be a normal child. I'd lived in England since I was about 2. My mom's from England. And even though I was at a military base, we didn't necessarily stay on the military base like some Americans do. So it was quite a culture shock coming back to the States and especially coming back to California. It's a little bit different than England. And so I wanted to kind of get into American life and make friends. And it was difficult at first because I was obviously different because not only I'd been in a movie, but also I had a different accent than a lot of other people and I said things differently. So I just kind of continued with that. And then I decided to go on and get my education and become a teacher myself.
Which is something you'd always wanted to do, wasn't it? I remember reading that it was, teaching was your passion as a kid.
Yeah, as a child, I always enjoyed sort of, lining up my dolls, especially my Cabbage Patch Kid, and teaching to them. And I really enjoyed that kind of stuff.
Bro. Well, let's start talking. Oh, in case anybody somehow doesn't know, Carrie played Newt in the film. So, we're going to be talking a lot about Newt and a lot about Carrie's experience on that. Just in case. I don't think there'll be many people listening who wouldn't know that, but you've got to cover all bases. So it's a pretty well-known story that you were offered the audition after Sarah Jackson discovered you at school, coming around taking photos, which you would not get away with nowadays.
No.
I don't believe you've ever actually talked about the audition process itself, and this is something I really love to hear about the whole the whole filming experience. So do you remember much about it? Was there any specific scenes that you had to act out from the film?
For the most part, I really remember. I did a lot of the scenes. I do remember at first a lot of the auditions happened at my school, at my elementary school, in one of the rooms. So we'd go there sort of after school. And I do my whatever scene they had. And I know a couple times, my mom would take me and obviously my brother would have to come with and be stuck sitting out in the hallway. And so sometimes they'd invite him to come in and do the scene. And that's how he actually got the part of my brother in the movie, was because he had done so many of the scenes with me. After a while, at one point, they called and said that there was about 10 girls that I went to school with. And they wanted to have us all go to London for auditions and I guess probably maybe to get to know us a little bit and our personalities. I remember bits and pieces of that one. And so they actually hired a tour bus, and all the families and the girls, they took us all to London, and we met with James Cameron, all these different people, and auditioned and everything. And then they dropped us off at the studios, and then they took all the families out to go do things in London. And then they came back, and obviously we went home. Shortly after that, we got a phone call and said that it was between myself and a girl in the States. It was just down to the two of us. And so they were actually flying Sigourney over on Concorde, which at the time was pretty impressive, just that, so you knew someone flying on Concorde. But also I was excited because just recently seen Ghostbusters. So I remember going to that interview and just immediately she and I kind of hit it off. And towards the end, I asked for her autograph. Because, I didn't know if I'd ever see her again. And to be honest with you, I don't know if I completely understood the process of what was going on. We thought it was a part for like a small part in the movie. We didn't realize it was as big a part as it was.
Oh.
Yeah. So, we're kind of clueless in a lot of that stuff. So I guess everybody was kind of laughing because of how well she and I had kind of hit it off. I guess they pretty much knew that that I was going to get the part then. Anyways, and then shortly after they called and told us we had the part.
So that was kind of like a chemistry test then?
I'm sure it was, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Were you aware or were your parents aware it was meant to be the sequel to Alien at that time? Because you said you only thought the part itself was small, or were they just told it's a science fiction film in general?
We were told that it was the sequel to Alien. I don't think I've ever seen it. I know my dad had seen it, and we're not, I still don't like scary movies, which everybody finds hilarious, ironic, I don't know. Yeah, I really don't like scary movies. And so my mom had never seen it, but Gail and Hurd, they had insisted that I watch Alien before we filmed Aliens. So at least I had an idea of what to expect and what it was going to be like. But the movies, they're similar, but they're different in so many ways too. So, which makes it hard to compare them really.
Well, that leads us on to the next question quite nicely then, doesn't it, Eric?
It does, yeah. Basically, we have a tradition on the podcast where we like to ask our guests about the first time they saw any of the Alien films themselves. But of course, you were in a strange position as you weren't exactly the target demographic for an Alien film. And you were actually in the sequel. Now, we weren't sure when or if you'd seen the original, but in doing our preparation for this, we saw that you'd mentioned, as you say, that James Cameron was actually very adamant that you watch Alien prior to working on his interpretation sequel, and that you'd actually laughed throughout it. We were hoping you could tell us a little about that first watch of it at that age particularly, and if it helped with his intention of helping you get immersed in that world, considering your age at the time.
I don't think anything can really help completely get you assimilated to that world. And I'm not sure even after watching it if I completely understood everything that I was doing. I was probably about 8, maybe just turned 9 when I first watched the movie, because I was 8 when I tried out for it. I was 9 when I filmed, and then I was 10 when it came out. Yeah, we watched it, and I thought it was funny. Now I'd probably watch it and scream. But I didn't find Alien to be super scary. And I know when we were filming Aliens, James Cameron was always trying to scare me, and he would do various things. And I would always say, oh, that's just a rubber chicken, or what, big deal. This is just, that's just so-and-so in an alien suit, or various things. But when I did actually watch Aliens, it was at the premiere down in LA. And James Cameron was sitting behind me. And I didn't realize that he was sitting there. I went in, everybody was probably looking at me trying to figure out who this kid was going in. And I remember just sitting down and then watching it. And there's a scene in Aliens. Most of them I saw filmed, but there's this one scene I didn't see it filmed. And it was fairly close to the beginning when they're walking through. The Marines had just come into the Marine lab. And there's the big canisters that have the face huggers in.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the stasis tubes.
Yeah, and one jumps forward.
Yeah, a Paul Reiser, yeah.
Looks like love at first sight to me.
Yeah, and it jumps forward, and everybody kind of... Well, I jumped, and I kind of... a little yell. And like I said, I didn't know James Cameron was sitting behind me, and he tapped me on the shoulders, which then, of course, I screamed again. And he was... you twice. He was so excited because he got me twice. Most of the rest of it, it's one of the few movies I can watch and not get scared.
Because you knew how it was all made.
Exactly. Well, my cousins, and a few years ago, I went to a convention in London, and my cousin's twins at the time were maybe 13, 14, and they wanted to watch Aliens, and they insisted on watching it with me. And then they said, can we watch every scary movie with you? Because I had to tell them what was going to happen before it happened, so it prepared for it.
What was it about Alien that made you laugh through it then? Was it just cheesy to you, or?
I don't know. It was probably my 8-year-old humor. You have a different sense of humor at that age than you do now. I don't know. I just thought it was funny, the alien popping out. Now, like I said, now it would completely freak me out. I have no clue why I laughed.
Like, kids have that thing for, like, slime and gore and stuff anyway. And when they're playing,
Exactly. Well, like, my 9-year-old son has a very different sense of humor than I do. You know, the things he finds funny are things that I don't.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
So, talking aliens then, you and Newt occupy, half of the emotional core of that film. And so much of that rested on the relationship between Newt and Ripley, you and Sigourney. And you've spoken in the past about how you still maintain a really close relationship with Sigourney. But I was hoping you could just, cast the mind back a bit and tell us about how that relationship developed while you were working on Aliens. I mean, did you two go and spend time together off the set of the film? Were you doing stuff outside?
A lot of people think that we did, but honestly, I think the Marines did a lot of stuff and a lot of them lived together and they did a lot of things together, but I didn't really, because, I was so much younger than the rest of them. It's not like we went and hung out. Like, now we go to a convention and we all hang out, which is nice. Because I'm an adult now, it's different. Whereas I think Sigourney and I, like, our bonding started when we first met at that one audition. I remember she really liked my Velcro shoes and she kept taking them on and off. It was the scene that we did together was like the one in the med lab. And so she kept taking them on and off. And I think that, our relationship kind of started then. And she and I, people kept dying and kept leaving. And she and I were one of the few that kind of stayed. And we had so many scenes together. I mean, our dressing rooms were right next to each other. Kind of funny, they accidentally gave us we got there before she did, and they actually gave us her dressing room on accident. I mean, we were quickly moved to our correct dressing room, but we were right next to each other. And, she and I were always there. Makeup had to be done. Like, my makeup took a lot longer than the guys' makeup and things like that. So I think we did see each other a lot, but we didn't hang out off the set. I think it just kind of all happened. Sigourney's a very down-to-earth person and just, I don't know. I don't know what it is or how it happened, but, we've always just
naturally effortless.
Yeah. And when I see her, I can't even describe, like, I was at they were doing a photo shoot for Entertainment Weekly. And towards the end, I was sitting talking to all the behind the scenes people. And they were talking and someone said, oh, I'd love to be able to tweet and say, oh my gosh, you can't believe what I'm sitting here doing. But she said, obviously, I can't tell anyone what I'm doing. And I said, oh, I'd like to tweet the same thing. I said, it's kind of, for me, I'm more like them because I'm a teacher. I'm not Hollywood all the time. And I said, it's exciting for me to be sitting here in the same room as these people. And the lady's like, no, I meant sitting here talking to Carrie Henn like it's no big deal. I laughed. I was like, oh, no one will know who I am, And then they said, as I think like Bill Paxton and James Cameron and people like that started leaving, they were saying to me, like, what was the best moment that they had seen? And Sigourney and I hadn't seen each other in several years before that photo shoot. I came out of one side of one room and she came into the other thing at the same time. And they said that the best moment of that whole day had been when she and I first saw each other. And it was just, I saw her and it was like all the years kind of pass. That friend that you might not talk to for.
Yeah.
You just kind of pick, that's kind of how it is with her. Anyway.
Because you had the chemistry, and especially working with a young child, it's so important to have that. And that absolutely comes out on the screen. You and Sigourney have that chemistry, like you're strangers to one another, much like you were making the film, I suppose. But that bond comes across because you had that chemistry. It's very much evident.
Yeah, well, and I think you can see the progression throughout, as we are strangers, but we very much had similar experiences. We both lost our families and things like that.
You're talking about makeup, but of course, Newt famously carries around a doll she named Casey. It served a particularly haunting purpose by being the only thing left behind after her abduction, of course, just staring lifelessly upward through the water. But unlike most dolls depicted in films with children, of course, it consisted only of a head. Was there a reason behind the scenes for Newt, who's basically the survivor of this incredibly traumatic thing that's gone on with death, to basically be carrying around a severed head for emotional support? Or was it more of a technical issue with the props department?
Well, let me just tell you, I couldn't wait when I finally got rid of that head, because you know what a pain it was carrying that thing. It was not easy. It was kind of awkward to carry around the neck.
Yeah, it looks like it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so if you watch the scene with my family, when my dad comes back with the alien on his face, my brother and I, when we're having the argument, I'm hitting him with a doll. And that's actually Casey.
Oh, okay.
So then what it is, like, a child has their favorite doll or whatever. And a parent, throughout everything that happened to me on the colony, the head was all that was left of Casey.
Right. So it was very much a deliberate decision. And see, I was rewatching just the scenes you were in today as a refresher, and that just occurred even after so many viewings of that film. And even then, until you mentioned it, I hadn't twigged that she's got the doll as a whole piece in the tractor when they were face.
And they look very different too. They look very different because she had like nice blonde hair in the tractor, whereas dirty and gross and everything. Well, and I loved the doll because I was paid to hit my brother. Like sitting off set and couldn't say or do anything about it.
Talking again about the colony and Newt's life before, I suppose, the disaster hit. One of the most unsettling moments in the film is when the Marines, they're searching for the colonists and they come across one who's still alive, but she's cocooned and she's not begging them for a rescue, but for the salvation of death. Now, some of us have observed how this must have meant that woman was unfortunate enough to have survived, like Newt, right up until the Marines' arrival, and then must have got abducted around that time. Now, did James Cameron ever speak to you behind the scenes about how Newt and this colonist must have been surviving together, so you could have worked that into a particular reaction when they found her, when she was watching the cameras? Or were you basically told that Newt had just been entirely just on her own, no one to depend upon?
I was told that I was by myself completely. And to be honest with you, I never thought of that aspect of it until you just said it right now.
Yeah, it's one of those questions that does keep on arising, because also she looked a lot more unhealthy. So some of us have wondered, well, was she giving any food she found to Newt? Because it would have been interesting, this unseen aspect of the film. But if he told you you're on your own, yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Every May 7th, there's a picture of of Newt on set getting a birthday cake from Michael Biehn and Bill Paxton and Lance Hendrickson. And every May 7th, somebody has to be that guy or that girl that says, that's not Carrie Henn, that's Louise Head, who was one of your stunt doubles.
Usually it's me that says that.
I believe Kieran Shaw was also a stunt double for you, so I was also curious as to what your relationships was like with Louise or Kieran, if you even interacted with them at all.
I did have some brief interactions with them, but to be honest with you, usually when they were on set, I was in my dressing room doing my schoolwork.
Right.
So I saw them, but it was kind of in passing more than anything else. I probably saw my stunt double a little bit more than I saw Louise, only because, again, she was on set when I was off set and we just would kind of pass each other or whatever.
Okay. Did you do many stunts yourself? I mean, I know you did the slide, the water slide, but I can't think of many others that I know you did.
I did, like, the one where they pulled me across the floor at the end.
With the airlock.
Yeah, so I did that one. And then also, before I fall and go down the chute, I'm, like, climbing up.
Oh, the ladders.
Yeah, and I did a lot of that. He did the actual, like, landing on the wheel, whereas I landed on, like, a foam mattress type thing.
That would have been Kieran, sorry.
Yeah, he did that. But I did a lot of them myself. There weren't really that many big stunts, honestly. No. I mean, I guess it wasn't quite like today, where they have some crazy stunts and that. I didn't have tons of stunts to do.
I'm guessing it had to be one of the stunt people when you were surrounded by all the flames in the Queen's Chamber, maybe.
Actually, no, that was me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, I mean, it's a pretty natural even reaction of Sigourney, because in it, she's like pushing me behind her. And before we were filming, she was very concerned and worried and kept saying, make sure you're behind me. You can't get in front of me. This, that. It
was a proper flamethrower.
It was pretty legit. It was a kind of a crazy shell-shocked moment probably for me too. So I can, now as an adult and as a mom myself, I can see her concern. At the time I thought, what the heck? I'm not going to do anything. Like, you're telling me to stay behind you. I'm going to stay behind you.
Also, it was just lighting up like latex and rubber, and the entire set looked incredibly flammable, to put it mildly.
It was very flammable, and it was very hot.
Yes. While Newt sometimes gets superficially dismissed as, the little kid. It's her cynicism and Ripley like willingness to call grown-ups on their bullshit basically when she feels patronized, which to me it really cements her as one of the more believable portrayals of children on film. She's cynical about motives, but she needs honesty to be one of the key ways for Ripley to get through to her. Having made the transition to teaching young children yourself, did you ever find that to look back on that insider's perspective of a sort of a traumatized child, so to speak, useful in your approach, especially with those who might have been undergoing bullying or stressed through, say, parental divorce or something at home?
I don't know. I mean, you would think so, but I think probably not. I mean, I just, that kind of stuff is just more human compassion than anything else.
Yeah.
Because definitely as a child, I had no clue really the impact that my character even really had on the movie or anything like that. I'm kind of far removed from that. I didn't even realize how big Aliens was until about, I'm trying to think, about 11 years ago, maybe. I went to my very first convention in London. I had no concept of anything. I mean, I remember going, I was pregnant with my daughter and I went to a thing in LA, and I remember Galen Hurd was there and Jeanette Goldstein was there. And Jeanette said to me something about conventions. And I said, I don't even know what you're talking about. She's like, oh, you should do them. They'd be great. And I just kind of dismissed it and didn't really think too much about it. And then about 12 months later, I was found and invited to one in London. And I just couldn't, I was blown away by the whole thing. I mean, I still am when I go to conventions. Like I really didn't have a clue. And to me, it's very strange, kind of surreal feeling, kind of like my hidden life. I don't even know how to describe it. So I think it probably didn't really have as much of an impact on, I don't know.
So speaking of conventions then, you've probably only really been doing them relatively frequently over the last 4 or 5 years or so, at least from my perspective anyway, of watching all the appearances show up and everything. I actually had the pleasure of meeting you.
At the convention, right?
Yes, the one with Sigourney. Yeah,
yes.
You signed my poster for the website that's got everybody's... That poster must have cost me so much money on signatures.
Oddly enough, I remember you, so...
Yeah, I've got a picture of you signing that one as well. I would have liked to have then asked you, would you like to come and chat to us and be nerds? But I get so starstruck in person. I'm fine online, but in person, I get so starstruck.
Well, you should.
What was I going to... Oh, yeah. So what's been some of your more memorable, conventions, encounters at conventions? I mean, I imagine the social side of it with meeting all your fellow cast must be a big part of it as well. But, in terms of like meeting fans and stuff like that.
I mean, it is amazing to see everybody from Aliens, and it's nice for me to sort of gotten to know them as an adult versus as a child. They always, joke around, and they're always saying, oh, you feel like we all get together and time hasn't changed and this, that, and the other. And then Carrie walks in the room and we realize how much time has passed since Aliens.
Yeah.
They always say that it's like a family reunion for all of us. But to be honest with you, when I go to those things, it's all about the fans. And I try to make it as much. I try not to be. Sometimes you're at busier ones and you feel like you're a conveyor belt.
Yeah, it looks so stressful. I mean, when I'm like watching people just move through sign, I'm just like, God, that must be so hard on them as well, on the guests.
Well, and my thing is, I work hard for my money, and I know every single person who comes through, they've made the conscious effort to spend their money on an autograph for me. So I try to make it as nice as I possibly can. And I know sometimes people get upset with me because I chat to everybody, but I try not to make it like a conveyor belt, because it's an experience, and it's an experience for me. And it's very humbling for me as well to talk to everybody and to hear their stories and how Aliens has made such a difference in their life for various reasons, or even talk to people who were in the military and, they watched this before being deployed. As a military brat, that means a lot to me to have some sort of something in that. I mean, I try to make it all about the fans, but I will tell you, it is absolutely exhausting. It is really tiring. It sounds silly, but it really is.
Well, no, I bet your hands must get blinking cramped after all that.
Well, I'm probably more used to writing.
Yeah, I suppose with the marking.
Yeah.
Yeah, just throughout the day and everything than most people. But yeah, you have to smile. you often hear the same story about their favorite part in the movie, and you hear the same thing over and over again. And you don't want to say to someone, oh, I heard that 10 times in a row. You have to be polite about it.
Yeah.
That's something I'm super conscious of doing, like when we're doing interviews like this. I don't want to ask you something you've been asked 1,000 times. Yeah, I can understand that.
Well, I mean, and in interviews, a lot of times you get kind of variations of the same question. And I try to pull in like a few different things if I can think of something occasionally. So,
yeah. Back when you were actually doing the film itself, you mentioned, now obviously we had to look around there on set and other interviews, see what we can do differently. But one of the things I came across while reading up on other interviews was you've mentioned your most fearful moment wasn't anything to do with, acid bleeding monsters or anything. It's actually having to sit down for lunch while in character as Newt. Now, was this something James Cameron decreed as a necessity, or was it more like a suggestion from a friend? This can help you get into the role, or what?
Well, no, just sometimes not everybody ate in the cafeteria at the studios, but we went and ate at the cafeteria in the studios, and you couldn't change out of your costume to go eat lunch.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And then change back into it. But I was 9, so you're a little bit more aware of other people around you. And I just remember my first day, I was so worried about going. And I remember talking about it on set. And, I talked about it to my mom, and my mom said, oh, don't worry about it. And I talked about it to my tutor, and she'd said the same thing. I remember talking about it. So Sigourney, to everybody. And everybody's like, Carrie, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. Trust me, you're not going to be the most outlandish person there. And I just couldn't understand how, with my crazy hair and all that kind of stuff, how I couldn't be the most outlandish person. But they were filming Little Shop of Horrors at the same time.
Oh, wow.
At Pinewood. Yeah. So they were all in the cafeteria.
Yeah.
In their full full costume and everything too. So my tutor had actually bought me these, I don't know, you don't really see them anymore, but those big old sunglasses? They were like massive. My tutor had bought me those, and she's like, well, just wear these and no one will even notice you. So I remember wearing those the first day. I mean, I quickly got over that, but yeah.
I bet you got used to it though when everybody's literally like that though, aren't they?
Yeah, you don't even notice it after a while, but you can imagine it, 9 years old, you're like...
Very self-conscious.
Yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of things kids do, you did a hell of a lot of screaming in this film. There's a transition in the special edition that I've always loved, where it's your scream going into a howl of wind, after your dad comes back. I was, like Eric says, watching previous convention interviews and stuff like that, and I saw in one you mentioned you ended up with laryngitis following an impromptu screen that James Cameron had requested, but you never actually mentioned which scene that was for.
It wasn't actually for any particular scene. So, throughout the years, I've heard various things, as teenage girls have said some unkind things to me. And one thing they used to always say to me was, you only got the part because you can scream. That's all you did. And I never screamed in any of my auditions. And then one day, James Cameron said to me, you know what, after you deliver that line, I want you to scream. So I said, okay. So he said, we'll see how it sounds and then we'll go from there. So I remember delivering my line, screaming, and no one said cut. So I just kind of kept screaming. Like I didn't know what to do. And finally I stopped. I'm like, can I stop? And I looked and everyone was just looking at me. And I said, why is everyone looking at me? Like nobody told me to stop.
Yeah.
James Cameron just said, that was really good. We're going to use that again. And so then I did continue to use the screaming. And I think the laryngitis, it wasn't any particular scene. I know what scene we were filming at the time, but I don't think it was necessarily that scene. I think it was just a lot of...
just accumulation.
Yeah, it was the scene that we were filming was towards the end after Sigourney saves me and we're climbing up into the spaceship. After the Queen Alien has we're getting away from the Queen Alien.
Okay.
We're climbing up into it. And it was right around in that time that we were filming that when I got laryngitis, but I don't think it was that particular. I think it was just used my vocal cords a lot, I guess.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So often people talk about the best time they had on a film, which makes sense, obviously. But I want to know something about some of your worst memories from Aliens. I'm going to go ahead and just assume it was that Hive sequence where you were stuck in that little nook and cranny in the Hive wall, but maybe not.
Would assume correctly. There was many things about the scene that I hated. It was literally a hole I had to crawl through to get into the cocoon.
Through the back?
Yeah, well, it was kind of through the side. It was made of fiberglass and it could only be broken once.
Right.
So we had to do several, the scene over and over and over and over again. And, everything had to be depicted exactly. You're going to pull this part, Sigourney, you're going to pull this part first. And then everything had to be done. and practiced multiple times without it. But James Cameron had said to me that, you know, you cannot break this. You cannot do anything. We can't make it exactly the same again. So I couldn't actually rest my hands on the fiberglass. So I was sitting like on a wooden stool, but that was covered in fiberglass, but I couldn't rest them on there because it could possibly be too much weight and break it.
Yeah, because you had your hands at an awkward angle, didn't you?
Yeah. So, you know, sitting like that for ages, and then they pull me out, and then, you know, I'd be able to walk around a little bit, and then they'd put me back in and then walk around a little bit. And it took several days to actually do that scene because there were so many different aspects and different angles that they got it from. And so we were actually on set. We were at the Acton Power Station when we were filming that. So we weren't at Pinewood. So I just had a trailer, and I didn't have, you know, like a nice bath or shower or anything like that, like I did in my dressing room back at Pinewood, because I could wash and clean up before I went back to the hotel. So they offered to provide us with a hotel closer to Acton, to the power station. And my mom and I, you know, we never wanted to make a fuss. And that's probably the English side of us. Like, oh, no, we'll just go back to the hotel. So the wardrobe people were lovely. And they said, you can take the costume home, just make sure you bring it back, you know. So we would go back to our hotel, and we were staying closer to Pinewood, and everybody that worked at the hotel knew what was going on. But this was around Christmas time. And so I went back to the hotel in full costume, and I had slime and everything, because the slime is what took so long to get off. You know, so I had the slime and everything. My hair is all filthy. My face is filthy. And I had my winter coat over it with the hood up, and they were having like a Christmas ball in our hotel.
You must have got some dodgy looks.
Well, it wasn't too bad. I was able to kind of, you know, scamper in really quickly because I knew where everything was. So I was able to rush in and get to the elevator. And my mom, we were waiting for the elevator, and these two couples came, and they were in tuxedos and like formal dresses and everything. They were like looking at me, and they were looking at my mom. And then we got into the elevator, and, you know, I just kind of went straight to the back corner because I wanted to be
inconspicuous. Anyways,
and then they got in, and they like avoided me, and then went to the opposite. They were at the front corner, or as far away as they could. Anyways, so I mean, there was like a lot around that whole thing, and then like Sigourney cut her hands on the fiberglass. Yeah, it was a really tough scene on so many levels, but that was probably the most draining scene out of all of them.
So your expressions as Newt and that, where you kind of look really browned off, they're completely real. That wasn't acting.
They were, yeah. Well, and it's funny because, you know, as a kid, there's little things that you think that like, oh man, really going to get in trouble. And there was a teeny tiny, I mean, probably like a needle-sized piece of fiberglass sticking off right where my hand was, and I accidentally bumped it once, and I'm sure nobody even noticed it, but I was terrified.
Yeah.
Someone would notice that I had messed that teeny tiny bit up, and I was going to be in trouble. And
there's a quote from you doing that scene that I think is just hilarious, and it was something like you telling Jim that it should be illegal for him to do that to little kids.
Imagine, I can't believe I said that.
Yeah.
I don't remember that. He did bring it up we were at San Diego Comic-Con at the panel, and he brought that up there, and I was absolutely mortified that I said that to him.
One of those stuff that kids say moments.
Yeah, and I just kept, oh my goodness. And my mom was in the audience, and she's like, I can't believe you said that.
Well, as you said earlier, a self-declared military brat, we were interested, how did your parents feel about you appearing in a film with such a heavy military component? Because it was in many ways a futuristic war movie.
You know, again, it goes back to, we didn't really completely understand everything that I was signing up for at the time. It was kind of one of those things that it fell into our laps. It happened. You know, my parents asked, do you want to do this? If you want to, great. If you don't, that's great too. It's completely up to you. As a mom, obviously, I look at it now. My kids haven't seen it. They just saw a little bit of that San Diego Comic-Con convention. And they were just like, Mom, all the bad language in that. I can't believe it. You know, and, you know, all the guns and this, that, and the other. I think it was a different time then, too, than it is now. You know, you hear, and I know my kids hear worse on the playground. You know, the kids say things and all that kind of stuff. I mean, at the time, like, the guns didn't bother me because I was at a base that, you know, I would see that kind of stuff. And I don't think it necessarily concerned my parents because they knew that I had respect for guns. I had, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't going to go and pick them up. I knew that that wasn't something I was supposed to do. And I knew like, saying the bad language and things like that wasn't something that I was going to do. But I don't remember there ever being like a discussion about it or anything like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe behind the scenes there was.
Were you conscious of them being fake guns?
I was. Some of them, like the ones with that flamethrower at the end that we were talking about earlier, there were some, like Sigourney, she had to make sure she got everything right because there were some fake bullets and there were some real ones in there for various things. And so I was I guess I never treated it like it was a fake, even though I knew they were. I always treated them like they were real and just stayed away from them.
Yeah, well, that's what they tell you to.
Yeah.
The last Alien film that came out, Alien Covenant, everyone made a big deal out of the fact that most of the principal cast had body doubles that were then massacred in various ways. Now, while it wasn't until Alien 3 that your dummy, even though I don't think this one was based on you, had that treatment, and I still cannot watch those scenes, they are horrific. I turn away every single time. That's the only scene in any of the Alien films that I have to turn away from nowadays.
Well, the autopsy.
Yeah, the autopsy and the stuff like that. I hate them.
Yeah.
But you had a dummy made for Aliens.
Yes.
Did that creep you out as much as it would creep me out?
I was never really around when it was being used. It was really only used. Sigourney had a bad back. And so between carrying the guns and carrying a 9-year-old child, it was a concern that it would be too much for her back. So they decided to create this dummy and see how it was. Now, for me, I laugh because I can see when it's the dummy and when it's not. When I watch it now, I'm like, oh, it's so obvious. Probably to me because I know it's not me. But that was really the only time that it was used during it. It was more creepy, like I had to have the face done and things like that.
The full casting. Yeah,
well, I think actually, if I remember correctly, I think Louise actually did part of the casting, but I had to do the face.
Right. Yeah, I think she did the legs, didn't she?
I think she did, if I remember correctly. I don't remember doing them. I vividly remember the face.
I bet that must have been so claustrophobic.
Yeah, it was pretty scary. But Stan Winston was there with his guys, and they were amazing during the whole thing, and just talking to me about it and what exactly they were doing, the process, and everything. So that was nice.
Yeah, what were your memories of Stan Winston, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago now?
Yeah, I was really sad when I heard that. As a kid, it was always cool to be the youngest one on the set. But as I'm getting older, I'm realizing that it's not nice because I'll be the one left, But he was amazing. He was so nice, so down to earth. All of his guys were fantastic. He was just really, really, really nice guy. I really enjoyed working with him, and I feel very honored to have had that opportunity.
Did you have much interaction with him personally outside of the body casting?
Well, he did a lot of things.
Oh, he did second unit, didn't he?
Yeah, he did a lot of things on the set. So he was there a lot. And it was nice because like in the med lab, when like the aliens were kind of coming at you everywhere, the face huggers, and they showed me how everything worked. He would always make sure that I knew how everything was going to work so that I wasn't surprised by it or I wasn't scared by it or anything like that. Everyone was so, I think, very conscious of it. And I probably didn't realize then as much as I do now growing up, like thinking back to it. And even at the San Diego Comic-Con convention, Gail Ann Hurd made a comment and she said, we were always so worried that we'd traumatize you for life. And I said, oh, no, that didn't happen. So you're in luck.
Though the special edition restored most of the footage, there's still a little bit of you that I'm aware of where Newt's trying to run away from Hicks in the operation centre and you bite his hand again. That wasn't included in any of the edits, probably for good purposes actually, because he makes a rabies comment about you, so that would have been bad for his character. But I was just wondering if you recalled any additional stuff that you shot that wasn't seen in either the theatrical release or the special edition?
That was the only scene that I could think of that I had never actually seen in any of the other releases. But I think everything else was in either theatrical or the special edition.
Fair enough then. Yeah, it's quite lean. There's very little deleted scenes that were left on the side that at least I've seen.
Yeah. Well, and there was a huge debate. Well, because two of the biggest scenes that they deleted were the ones with my family and then Sigourney hearing about her family. And both of them were very personal to us because the scenes with my family included my own real brother.
Yeah.
So obviously I wanted that. And the scenes where she sees the picture of her daughter is actually a picture of her mother.
Yeah.
That also reinforced the bond that would come with your two characters later on.
Exactly. So personal on a personal level, but also for our characters, it was a very big. It was a very big deal when they were deleted, and they were deleted purely for time frame. Whereas now our movies are how long, and they don't even think about it. But at the time, it couldn't be above a certain amount of time.
Yeah, it was all about getting multiple showings in a day in the cinemas.
All about the money.
You've spoken of having written a journal and made a scrapbook during your time on set. Might this ever see the light of day and get published somehow, or is it considered too personal? Because I'm sure if nothing else, we'd love to see some pictures you took at the time.
Gosh, well, it was part of my schooling at the time is I would write a journal about different things that would happen. I do wish I had written more journal entries than I did. I don't know how many people would be that intrigued by what I have to say. I did at one point think about writing a book more for my children. Like my grandmother was born in rural Ireland, and she wrote a story all about her life for her grandchildren. And so I've often thought about writing it like for my children or my grandchildren. Someone told me I should write it because not very oftentimes you hear about like a child's perspective about being or anything like that. I don't know. I've thought about it. I just don't know how many people would be very intrigued by it besides my family.
I think a lot of people would be very interested, particularly because, as you say, you had that different perspective. You would have interpreted things that adults wouldn't. And of course, you can now look back at it in adult years and say, well, I should have looked at it in this way, but because I had the child's perspective, I looked at it. So I do think a lot of people, as I said, especially if you did any pictures yourself or your family did any pictures, you would not believe how ravenous the fandom can be with anything. Like you can have a stick of bubble gum, Sigourney Weaver touched, and you could probably put it on eBay and it will sell for $1 million or something. Believe me, there will be interest for it.
That's funny. Well, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe one day.
Well, speaking about Sigourney Weaver herself, we understand she made a tradition of handing out flowers to each actor for what she called their death day, whenever they filmed their own character's demise. Now, obviously, little Rebecca Jordan, she was rescued from that fate, but she did hand you an engraved picture frame after production had ended. Do you still have it? And what else did you take from the set as a souvenir?
Yeah, I do still have it. She gave it to me. Actually, it's on my mantelpiece with some other family pictures. And it just says, to Carrie, love Sigourney. Yeah, the days that everybody died were actually kind of big for the rest of us that were behind. Sigourney and I used to joke that we were the orphans that nobody wanted. Because it was kind of like people were being adopted or, you know what I mean? Like leaving and then all of us behind. I mean, it was obviously good for us that we didn't die as well. But she gave that to me on the last day of filming. It's still pretty important to me. It has a picture of the two of us in one of our dressing rooms. So we were sort of in character, I think she might have been in her costume, but not me. I asked, that was my problem, is I asked if I could take things.
Yeah.
You don't ask, you just take.
That's what I found out later on. You don't ask. So I didn't take things. I really wanted, oddly enough, as much as she annoyed me, I wanted Casey, but I didn't get to keep her because I was told she might be needed for more like scenes. And that, I guess they did actually use her to film the water scene later. But I have random things like the second grade citizenship award that they found in Newt's nest. The dress that I wore in that, I actually have that dress. But how many people would know that it was that dress unless I said it? To be honest with you.
That's still an important piece of cinema history because that film is so iconic on so many levels.
Yeah, I guess, but I don't know how many people would actually
instantly recognize it.
No, you'd have to tell them. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have random things though. Like I have a bunch of, I have my original script that they gave me that I had actually signed at the time. And then I randomly, when we just remodeled our office, and I found a letter that came with my final script. So I ended up framing my final script and my old script in the letter. And then I have a bunch of the call sheets. So I have random things like that, but not anything.
There's no egg sat in a corner anywhere.
Because again, I was the polite child who asked instead of just taking.
What was your last day of filming? What was?
Oh goodness, I don't remember what my last day was. I know we had a cake. We ended up having, my grandmother in Chicago had actually died, so we ended up having to leave a few days early the set. But I was all finished with my filming. But then I went back. Well, I went to school, but then I would have to take days off, and I went back for voiceovers and things like that. So it was in February timeframe that we finished.
But given that you decided to pursue a career in teaching, I can't imagine you were too bothered from a work point of view when they decided to kill off Newt for Alien 3. But how did you feel about the way they handled her death in the film?
It was, I don't know, it was kind of mixed feelings because all through Aliens, it had been talked about like, oh, if there's a sequel, it will include the family unit of Hicks, Ripley, and Newt. So I knew well beforehand because Sigourney actually, so when they cut the scene with my brother in it, Sigourney called to let us know because she wanted Chris to know from her that that was what was happening. So when they came out and agreed on that was the script for Alien 3, she actually called to let me know what was going on so that we had a heads up kind of, to be nice and let us know. But it was still, I mean, she sent me this really cool coat and it said Carrie Alien 3 on it. She made sure I was included in the premiere of Alien 3. So I got to go to the premiere when I was 10, but really had no meaning to me. I met some really cool people there, but it really didn't have much of a meaning to me. Whereas I was in high school by this stage when Alien 3 came out. So, I don't know. I think I was like maybe a junior. I was like maybe 15, 16. So for me, I got to go to another premiere of a movie where I was older and could I knew who the stars were, whereas I didn't know who they were really before. So it was kind of a bummer that it was cut out, but it was still a really cool experience to be able to go and be a part of that as a little bit older. And Sigourney made sure I was sitting next to her during it was kind of weird because I got out of the limo and I was walking the red carpet and people were like, someone was going ahead of me telling all the press, oh, this is Carrie Henn. And I thought, why are you telling people this? Nobody's going to know who I was. And people were actually like taking my picture and they were asking for autographs and everything. So that was kind of just weird. And then when we got in there, they ushered me in and took me to a seat and they said, this is Carrie's seat. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. And they said, well, no, Sigourney wants you sitting next to her. So she actually covered my eyes for the actual autopsy scene. Yeah. And I will be completely honest, I've never actually watched the autopsy scene.
You're very lucky.
That was, in a weird way, that was the last time Ripley and Newt were on a red carpet together in a kind of weird way, even for a film where Newt had her demise.
Yeah.
While several of the cast attended the opening of the attraction in London known as Alien War, which I went to.
Lucky bastard.
Aaron didn't get to go to it. He was a little whippersnapper at the time.
Yeah, I'm a little younger.
Yeah. Now, you didn't get to experience the grand opening, but you did, we understand, go to see it as a paying member of the public later on. Could you tell us about your impressions of that, and how did they react when they found out they had a genuine survivor of Hadley's hope in the group?
Well, so I wasn't able to go. I'd actually just been in England about 3 weeks before the grand opening of Alien War, visiting my grandparents, but school had started, so I wasn't able to go back for it. But they sent me a message or a letter and said, if you're ever around, please stop by. So I don't know, maybe a year or so later, I happened to be in England visiting my grandparents again, and my cousin Joanna, my brother, and I decided to go to London. And so we said, oh, let's go check it out. So we went to go check it out. Of course, the pictures are horrible. My hair was a complete mess. So I borrowed my brother's baseball hat and everything. It's kind of embarrassing to look at now. But so we went and we kind of explained, I said, is whoever is in charge, are they around? And they didn't, obviously, they were kind of dubious of me. And then I kind of explained who I was. And then suddenly, everyone's moving around. And I really didn't have a concept of who my character was or anything like that at this stage still. I was in high school. So they kind of pulled us off to the side and they said, do you want to go through it? And I said, yeah, I want to see what it's all about. So they said, okay, but we're all the aliens are coming out. No one's on break. This is going to be a full on alien war for you. So we said, okay, bring it on. No problem. I was terrified. I caught myself saying lines up there, it's just up there. All these different lines through it. My cousin and I were holding on to each other the whole time. Aliens were popping out from all these crazy places. And then at the end, and we were with just a regular, a couple families, I think, that went in there. So they had no clue anything. And then at the end, they explained to the families who I was and everything, which was kind of weird. They took me through it and we got to tour it. They closed it down. and we got to see everything because it was the actual sets from Aliens, and which was it was really cool to see it, and it was neat. They actually had my dummy head.
Wow.
It was kind of creepy and cool at the same time. Sorry, I thought I had my. I don't know what just. Sorry, I thought I had my notifications off. It was kind of creepy to see your heads. They had it in an alien in an egg.
Yeah, I kind of remember that vaguely, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it was weird. And then, we did pictures and all that kind of stuff. And then the guy who had actually created it had invited us to go to lunch the next day. So we went to lunch at Planet Hollywood. It was like right around.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And he had requested that I sit, there was an area that had all Aliens memorabilia. And so he requested that particular table that was right there. And so we were sitting there and all these people kept coming over and taking pictures. Like people walk around, take pictures of different memorabilia at places like that. And this lady was really rude to me. And she's like, you need to move right now. And I said, what? And she goes, move your head. I don't want your head in my pictures. I'm like, okay. So I'm like trying to duck down and you're not ducked down enough, duck down more. And she was getting really rude to me. So finally the guy's like, do you know who this is? Like that picture might be a little bit more interesting if you keep her in it, which was kind of funny. Anyways, but Alien War was absolutely amazing. I really wish it was still there.
Yeah, you're not the only one.
Yeah.
I've spoken about it before, but I don't know if it was the same. I'm guessing you had exactly the same experience as me, but we went into a part where we had to all sit down, I think in an APC or drop it. Yeah, and that part just before the alien comes out, because it goes strobe lighting, and when the strobe lights hit and the alien, I actually punched the guy in the costume.
Oh my gosh!
It was just, I'm sure his head wasn't in the, because the head is in the neck, but I just hit this, just impulse, because you have that psychological reaction. So
I was lifting my feet up because I thought it was going to be, like some of those things where they have like
the false claws,
like underneath.
Yeah.
Whatever. And I was like lifting up my feet and I was screaming. Oh my gosh, that was really scary. And then I was terrified when they took the person.
Yes.
I'm like, oh my God, it wasn't one of us, was it? Who did they take?
See, in mine, that person was just smiling. So I turned to my friend. I was thinking, was that a plant, or were they just laughing because they got people grabbing them in weird places or what?
And I didn't even notice that they were like anything like that. I was just terrified they had taken someone.
Yeah, because you never know. Are they going to take you and just you're a guest? But is it going to happen?
You never know.
Yeah.
Well, at the risk of taking a bit of a downer question, then. So, like its predecessor, Aliens left a huge legacy on the cinematic landscape and the people involved in making it. But for you, that legacy wasn't always such a positive experience when you were younger. Now, you touched on this briefly, but I remember reading that you got bullied when you were younger for your role in Aliens. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, so when I moved back to the States, I was in 5th grade, which is, I think, year 6 in England. And so I was, 10 years old. And I started my school and Aliens had just come out that summer. So people didn't know me as me. They knew me and thought of me as Newt in Aliens. And it was kind of a pretty crazy summer for us as far as, we did a lot of flying here and there for press things and that. But my mom and dad were very much, I still had to do the dishes every day and all that kind of stuff. So when I went to school, I just thought it would be like my old school that I had gone to since kindergarten. And my very first day of school, I remember just trying to make new friends. And I was sitting talking to a girl on a bench and the whole school surrounded me and started asking me questions. And that was kind of weird. And then, after that, there was like a group of girls and they weren't necessarily very nice to me and they would make fun of me because I had an accent. So there are words that I said that did not sound American at all. I mean, I still, to this day, I can never remember which is the English version of words and which is the American. I'm like, vitamins, which one's American? Yeah. I mean, silly things like that, So I was always very conscious of what I said and I would try to say it as American as I could. But also on top of having that, I was also very different from the other girls because I had been in a movie. And 5th grade is kind of when, let's be honest, girls get really mean. Mm-hmm. We can be our own worst enemies, I think, sometimes. And that was the age I was when I moved here. So by 6th grade or year 7, everyone was kind of used to me and it wasn't as big a deal. But then year 8 and 9 was actually our 7th and 8th grade is at a junior high. So, everybody was used to me at my school. And then the junior high is like 6 or 7 different schools coming together. So for the first year, my 7th grade year, it kind of happened the same. And then 8th grade, it was the same because it's more kids. They just keep coming in. And so I was, and I'm kind of, a lot of people don't believe this when they meet me, but I'm kind of shy. Like doing interviews and getting on stage and that is not my comfort zone. It's a huge step for me to do something like that. And so I just became even shyer and I didn't really talk or say much. It got to the point by the time I hit high school, I didn't even want to talk about aliens because sometimes you never knew. People made up lies. I mean, you look on the internet and I see things that people have written. I'm like, I don't even know who you are. And you're trying to say you're my best friend. Like, clearly you're not, But people would be so mean and hateful and just say unkind things. And all at that age I wanted to do was kind of be like everybody else.
Just live a normal school life.
Yeah, I didn't want any of that other stuff. I'm Carrie. I'm not Newt. And so it was hard and it was tough. I wish I had realized then. What I realize now is just that so much of it came from jealousy. But at the time, you don't realize that, and it's hard to understand that.
Well, it's a tough time anyway, isn't it? I mean, that age.
It's like such an awkward age anyways, and then throw that on top of it, which probably kind of helped push me towards more going into teaching than anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, like I went to university and I never told any of my friends that, nobody knew anything about aliens. And like the internet wasn't like it is now. So it's not like you could, email was just, I had just gotten an email through my university and that was like, ooh, big deal,
Yeah.
It was like America Online just coming out type stuff. So it really wasn't like what it is now. And I remember Entertainment Weekly was doing like a Where Are They Now type interview. And I did one. I did it with them, never said anything to anybody because none of them knew anything about it. I did it after school one day. And I remember a friend of mine came to school and she walked into class and she put Entertainment Weekly magazine down and she said, "What is this?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I don't know. And I opened it up. I go, "Oh yeah, Entertainment Weekly. I did an interview with them." And she's like, "I've known you for 3 years and you've never told me this?" Like, I open up my magazine and there you are, Obviously, I've, kind of come to terms with everything. And, once you realize the motive, behind so much in life is jealousy, you can kind of just move past it and whatever. And I don't know. It is what it is. I think maybe it made me maybe that had more of an impact on me as a teacher than my actual character. Because like in my class, I do not tolerate bullying. And I'm pretty strict when it comes, especially that kind of stuff. So I don't know.
I'm going to assume not now. Sorry, Eric, I'm totally jacking your question.
No.
But does aliens crop up in your day-to-day life anymore, or is it all just sort of, old hat now for the people that are closest to you?
Well, the people who are closest to me, it is old hat. I mean, it's nice because now I'm married and I have children.
Well, your husband's a little bit of a celebrity in his own right, isn't he?
Okay, are you talking about, they have something about like a rock climber?
Is that not right?
Yeah,
okay.
That's not my husband. Although I do tease him and say that all the time. But no, that's not actually my husband. I have no clue who that is. They just happen to have the same name. But being able to go to conventions and being a part of various things, they get to see a part of my life that not very many people can understand, which is really nice. It doesn't necessarily crop up every day. I do randomly I've lived in the town I lived in since Aliens came out. So a lot of people know me. It's not really a big deal. But I do have, like children or grandchildren of people that like maybe my parents knew when I was growing up, or I went to school maybe with their aunt or, some sort of family member. But sometimes I'll have random kids come in and they'll quietly come up to me and say, "Hey, I have a really big favor to ask." Kind of like, okay, I'm thinking, what could they possibly need me to do? And it'll be something like, "My dad has been a fan of Aliens ever since, it came out. But since you guys went to school together, he was always embarrassed to ask you for your autograph. But his birthday's coming up or Christmas is coming up or fall, whatever. Would you mind signing his DVD for him?" Or, they'll ask me random things like that. But really, it doesn't impact my daily life, which is what I like. I can just be.
Yeah, you compartmentalized it through the years.
Yeah, which is kind of weird. I mean, but I can see how in that realm, like your head does get kind of big sometimes when you're at some of these conventions. And
that's the key, to not let that get to you. As long as you stay grounded, you should be fine. Yeah, that's a big part of what affects a lot of child stars' lives, and had things gone differently for you, I mean, if you had chosen acting, you would have had to have got used to what you already ultimately did go through, but like dialed up to 11.
I mean, I don't think it was quite as bad then as it is. The scrutiny is now. Maybe it was. I just didn't realize it. I mean, my parents are pretty down to earth. I don't think they would have let that happen. You know, I mean, in my house, I was still Carrie. You know, I mean, it was no big deal for any of us. So.
Yeah. Back in 2016, a large portion of the fandom were very excited to hear there's a possibility of the return of Ripley, Hicks, and Rebecca Jordan in Neil Blomkamp's Alien 5. Now, we know you previously spoke about your willingness to return for some sort of cameo, and we saw, very interestingly, some concept art that was done for the project of Newt, which looked very much like you are now.
That about 4 years before that picture came out, I almost had that exact same hairstyle and everything. It was very trippy to see.
Yeah.
I bet.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Now we know he spoke to Michael Biehn and Sigourney, but did Neil ever get in touch with you at all, even if just for maybe wanting some photographic references or for somehow being involved?
No, I was not. I was as surprised about a lot of the stuff that came out as the fans as well. You know, interestingly enough, occasionally, I will admit, my husband is much funnier than I am. So occasionally he'll tweet. He'll say, "Oh, I'm going to tweet or whatever," and I'll, okay, whatever. So he'll tweet a couple things for me sometimes. And the day that picture came out, my husband had tweeted something because I think it was right around. Was it around Alien Day? Was it on Alien Day? Well, he had tweeted something. I can't remember what it was. And then it actually, like, I was getting weird tons of notifications about stuff because at the time that he had tweeted that, something was tweeted by Neil Blomkamp. And so a lot of people thought that there was a connection to what I was talking about.
Stuff. Yes.
Yes. And it was like, I'm like, dude, you got to fix this. You got to fix this. You rarely tweet for me, but you did. And now you did this. You got to fix it. So he did. Picture came out and it was eerily looked like me about 4 years beforehand.
Yeah, because we do notice at that time that you were doing hashtag Newt Lives, and we were thinking, is this building up to something? Are you aware?
And what it was someone had said to us, you have to find a hashtag and just use that hashtag, a lot or whatever. And so that was what he's like, oh, we'll just do that. That's a great one because you're still alive, And then all that stuff started coming out. And then I'm like, oh, no, people are going to think that there's more to this. And I don't know. Yeah. So my husband was in trouble for that one.
We know you didn't pursue acting, but we assume that you'd be interested in reprising the role if Newt was ever a major character in a potential sequel somehow, or even a video game that asks you to maybe do some voice acting for it.
Yeah, I would be interested in doing stuff like that. I know a few years ago, before the whole Alien 5 thing and all that kind of stuff, Rico, who played Frost in Aliens, actually had approached me that there was a
Alien Identity.
Yes, they were wondering if I would be interested in it was a small part. And I actually was going to play Newt's mother in the movie. Someone else was going to play like a grown-up Newt. And then they were going to do flashback scenes with the mom and the daughter. And my actual daughter was going to play me.
Yeah, because you said she looks exactly like you at that age.
Well, oddly enough, so like you were saying about did I have stuff? I don't have a lot of stuff from the set, but like when we moved from our old house to our current house, I had found in a box somewhere, which people would probably be amazed that it was just shoved in a box, the dress that I wore to the premiere of Aliens. And then, I washed it or whatever and put it in a cupboard somewhere. And which again, probably people are like, oh my God, I can't believe it. But my daughter randomly found it. She's 12 now. Well, she's almost 12. A couple years ago, she found it and she came downstairs. She's like, look at this funny dress I just found, Mom. And she was wearing the dress that I had worn to the premiere. And I was just like, oh my gosh, she looks just like me. And so I took a picture of her and I put it next to a picture I found online of me in the dress. And it was like, she's like my clone.
The weirdest deja vu ever.
It was really, really weird. It was so weird. I think I'd sent it to Sigourney because I'm like, oh my, because she's always saying how much my daughter looks like me. And then, a lot of the cast have met my daughter or have seen pictures of her and everything. And they all just said, it's like you walking into the room, similar personalities, everything.
So Newt has, a bit of a legacy itself. It's not just aliens, there's a Newt legacy. Not long after the film came out, Dark Horse Comics did a few series with an adult Newt as the lead alongside Hicks, although they were both eventually renamed after Alien 3 came out. But the original editions were recently released. So, you've got this series of Hicks and Newt going off on their own adventures. They've both shown up again in a new comic book adaptation of an alternate Alien 3 script, actually, where they were both alive and Sigourney was the one that was in stasis. And then Christopher Golden did a book that revisited Newt's family and Hadley's hope. And then that was also adapted into an audio drama where the young Newt was portrayed by a young actress called Marie Doherty. How aware are you of Newt's, extracurricular adventures after your portrayal in Aliens? It's okay to say no, I'm not.
Yeah. I really didn't know a lot about it. Recently, someone had brought to my attention about comic books, but I haven't seen them or read them or anything like that. My husband read them and then told me a little bit about it, but I don't know. It's a very weird feeling to think that something that you had a small part in has become, you know what I mean? Like that it becomes kind of bigger than what you ever would have imagined. And it's a very weird feeling. I don't know. I'm very self-conscious of myself, so I don't necessarily always like watching or looking at that. You know what I mean? Like, because to me, it's like, I don't know, will I be overcritical of everything?
Well, leading on from that, of course, NECA released a special edition action figure of you as Newt and Sigourney as Ripley as a 30th anniversary figure, and Super 7 are working on a sort of a retro-styled version of you too. You say it's strange. Like I know an actress, Juliet Landau, who's she's the daughter of Martin Landau and Barbara Bain, who was in Space 1999, and she was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And when her action figure came out, she said it's really weird because I must be one of the only families to have had like an entire family action figure series over the years. What is the feeling knowing that there's not just a version of you, but a version of a much younger version of you that's going to have thousands, possibly millions of collectors having these replicas of this likeness of you?
It is really weird. It is very strange. And I know when the ones from NECA came out, they sent me some. And so I set some aside for obviously my children and my niece, my brother's daughter. And then some of my family in England, I had my cousins and that I'd asked them, they wanted one. And so I said to my parents, do you want one? My mom's like, no, I'm sorry. I don't want one because I don't want to have really creepy looking. And, like my kids. So there's a figure that NECA did of just me. And then there's one they did of the two of us. So that was kind of because they had decided to do the single one as San Diego Comic-Con exclusive. And then there was like a lot of backlash, I think, about that. And so they decided to do that one. I mean, mine are in a closet. I signed them for my kids and I put them in my closet with a couple other things that I have set aside for them. And then maybe a year later, I finally got the one that had Sigourney holding me. And I had set some aside for my kids and my niece again. And accidentally I set it on my stairs, and my son was quite a bit younger at the time. And he actually opened up the package. I'd signed it and put it on the stairs and said, okay, I'll just put these away. But I didn't, relay that to my kids. And so my son was playing with it and my daughter freaked out. She's like, no, that could be worth something. What are you doing?
So she's got her head screwed on then.
Yeah.
My husband has made sure that they know don't mess with anything of Mom's as aliens. Like, you leave that alone. Anyway, so he then, of course, was very upset. But I said, oh, don't worry. We have an extra one. So we have this weird Newt character that plays with Star Wars characters and all. It's kind of a trip when I walk in and he's playing with it. I mean, it's kind of cool that Newt's like playing with, Han Solo and all that kind of stuff. But it's really, really, it's a very...
It must be surreal.
Yeah, it's a very weird feeling.
Okay.
I'm not like it or not, to be honest with you.
Well, that's actually everything from Eric and I. Do you have time for just a couple more from some of our community members?
Sure.
The Sailing Bunny would like to know what it was like working alongside Michael Biehn and Bill, because I don't think you really get to talk about your interactions with those guys as much. She's quite curious about those.
It was fun. It was nice. I probably spent more time with Bill Paxton. He was kind of like a big brother on the set, or sometimes people refer to him as like Uncle Hudson. He was like a big kid. So on set, in between takes, oftentimes if they knew there was time or whatever, the actors would leave the set and then come back when they needed to be. Hudson usually stayed behind with me because I had a card table, and then they brought like art supplies and different things. So sometimes I do schoolwork there, but sometimes I would do art, and I would do different things. Like once I made this long, it was Christmas time and I couldn't believe nobody decorated. So I made decorations to hang around everywhere, and I made this massive chain, and Bill Paxton actually stayed and helped me make the chain. And he taught me a little bit about art and different kinds of things because he was really into art.
Yeah, he was a set decorator, wasn't he, on previous films?
Yeah. So he showed me like sculpting how to sculpt the clay and do different things like that. So he and I probably spent the most time together. I didn't spend as much time with Michael Biehn. He came because there was actually someone else that was Hicks for a little while before.
James Remar.
Yeah. And so he came a little bit later. But again, the Marines, for the most part, the Marines kind of stuck together. You know, everybody, and I don't know if that was done on purpose, you know, to try to get that Marine.
That bond.
Camaraderie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that was all done on purpose or not. They were all often together. But I mean, like I said, Bill Paxton and I did become pretty close on the set, and we do a lot of things together. So
cool. Just before I go on to the next question, do you have any recollection of James Remar, what his performance was like? Because it's a bit of a black hole in the fandom. There's a few pictures of him, but nothing else.
It was supposed to be gruffer, though, wasn't he? Whereas Michael was more quiet and gentle.
Yeah, I mean, I vaguely remember him. He was always very nice to me. And obviously, as a child, I didn't really know what was going on. He and we all started at the same hotel. It was a Holiday Inn, and a lot of them ended up leaving and getting apartments together and things like that. But of course, my mom was like, no, we're not going to make a fuss. We're fine here. You know, don't worry about us. So he and I were actually two of the only cast members that actually ended up staying at the Holiday Inn. And I guess that's where kind of everything was discovered and happened. But I was unaware of it at the time. Just suddenly he was gone for me, you know, like, oh, he's gone and there's a new hit. So like I said, I didn't really understand it at the time. Now I do. I saw him at, I think it was the convention I met you at. I saw him there. He was at, I think it was the one in London. And that was kind of a weird feeling, you know, like it was kind of strange. I don't know if you knew who I was or not, but.
Fair enough.
Sam Hain 13 would like to know if you watched any of the other Alien films that came out after yours, and if you did, what you thought of them.
Well, like I said, I'm kind of a wimp. Sigourney and I always joke because she always says that her name should have been Wimpley instead of Ripley. Because she's kind of a wimp too. I saw Alien 3 in the theater, and which one is the one with Winona Ryder? Is that the fourth one?
Yeah, that's
Resurrection.
Yeah. So I've seen both of those once, but I have not seen any of the others.
Did you know about Joss Whedon's treatment of the fourth film, where it would have been Newt as the?
It would have been a clone of Newt
rather than
a clone of Ripley.
I did not hear that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you've just reminded me of that because I mentioned Buffy the Vampire Slayer earlier. Of course, he went on to do Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Joss Whedon. But I've always wondered that this Alien Resurrection script came first, and apparently he was writing a sort of either a teenage or a young adult version of Newt. And I've always wondered if that influenced what came to be Buffy Summers. So it's weird that in a way, if Newt hadn't been portrayed with you, there might not have been a Buffy the Vampire Slayer either. So it's really, it's one of those ripples on the water effects.
Never know.
That's everything then. So thank you once again for taking the time to come and answer our questions. I realise we've taken up quite a bit of your time.
My pleasure.
Before we do just sign off, is there anything that you want to share to our listeners that we just haven't given you the opportunity with any of our questions? Any specific anecdotes about your time on Aliens or stuff like that you just want to mention before we disappear?
Oh my goodness, I'm trying to think. Just trying to think if there's something that I have never told anyone before that might be, just something a little bit different. Okay, so in the APC when we're driving along and Sigourney runs over the alien.
Yeah.
And she comes back and she kind of panics because she doesn't see me, and then I'm sitting down.
And you give her the thumbs up.
I give her the thumbs up, but I was talking to Casey. I was talking to the head beforehand that it's okay, it'll be all right, it's okay or something.
Yeah.
So when we were filming that part, James Cameron said to me, just talk to Casey. It doesn't matter what you say. just talk to Casey. But like I said, it doesn't matter what you say because we're not going to hear you. So I was kind of mumbling to Casey that I felt stupid. This was the dumbest thing I had to do. And I talked to his head and like, like all these, like as a typical 9-year-old kid, you know, I felt really dumb doing that. And then when we were doing the voiceovers, suddenly that scene popped up on the screen and I had a moment of panic. And James Cameron's like, okay, what were you talking about during this scene? Because we've decided to put the words to it. And I could not bring myself to tell him that I talked about how dumb I felt and all that kind of stuff. And so he's like, okay, well, let's look at this and see if we can figure out what you're saying. And that's what they came up with. And it actually fits. Like you can't really tell that that's not what I'm saying.
No, I wouldn't want to notice that.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, I was talking about how dumb it was to talk to a doll's head. And I don't think I've ever actually even told James Cameron that. So if he hears this, sorry.
Woo! AvP Galaxy exclusive. Yeah, okay. Well, thank you. Where can folk find you online if they want to come and interact?
The best place to find me is on Twitter, and my handle is @RealCarrieHenn. I try to be interactive as much as I can. Obviously, with life, sometimes there are moments where I'm less active on there, but you can find me there. And if I have any conventions or anything like that coming up, I try to post as much stuff on there as possible.
Do you have anything coming up?
I don't right now, no.
Okay. But if anybody's listening to this who is not familiar with our network, we are one of the oldest Alien and Predator communities out there, 16 years last year. You can find our main hub on avpgalaxy.net, and that is the website with the news, articles, reviews, other podcasts, and an old school message board. They still exist. Ours is still thriving. But we are still on the modern socials as well. Find us on Twitter @avpgalaxy, and we're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube as Alien vs Predator Galaxy Verse as in VS. So, thank you everybody for listening. This is Aaron Percival,
Eric Adams,
and Carrie Henn signing off.